It's 5 p.m. across India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from London is my colleague, Ollie Barrett. Hi, Ollie.
Thanks, Tanvi. It is 12:30 p.m. here in the UK, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we will get you the latest from the UN General Assembly, updates on the situation in Karabakh, and claims of spying here in London. First, the headlines.
G4 countries, India, Brazil, Japan and Germany call for expansion of the UN Security Council to make the body more representative and efficient. Sudan's army chief appeals to the world to designate rival rapid support forces as a terrorist organization, even as the RSF says it is ready for a ceasefire.
The RSF is fully prepared to declare a ceasefire throughout Sudan.
And Indian sports minister cancels his scheduled trip to China after 3 Indian athletes from the eastern state of Arunachal Pradesh are barred from the Asian Games. As Ukraine continues its fight to recapture its territory from the invading Russian forces, the United States has once again showed its unwavering support towards Ukraine by providing new aid. The US president has called on world leaders to support Ukraine, even though he is facing skepticism from within the nation over the continued flow of monetary and military aid overseas.
The US has announced a fresh military aid package worth around $325 million for Ukraine. The package includes arms and ammunition that will help Ukraine to withstand Russia in harsh winter conditions.
With the days beginning to turn colder, Russia hopes once more to use winter as a weapon against the people of Ukraine. But as I discussed with President Zelensky, the people of Ukraine are steeled for this struggle ahead. And the United States is going to continue to stand with you.
The new aid comes as the Ukrainian president visited Washington, stressing that the trip has yielded significant results.
We are preparing to create a new defense ecosystem together with the United States to produce weapons to further reinforce freedom and the production of life together. This will yield global positive results.
The United States, which has been a staunch supporter of Kyiv, has also reiterated its accusation that Putin is the sole reason for the entire conflict.
Russia alone stands in the way of peace. It could end this today. Instead, Russia is seeking more weapons from Iran and North Korea that would violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions that Moscow itself voted to put in place.
Being the largest military donor to Ukraine, the US is now facing criticism both inside and outside for approving more funding. NATO Secretary touched upon it, saying Ukraine's victory will make it easier for the US to deal with China.
So if the United States is concerned about China and wants to pivot towards Asia, then you have to ensure that Putin doesn't win in Ukraine. Because if Ukraine wins, then you will have the second biggest army in Europe, the Ukrainian army, battle-hardened on our side. We have a weakened Russian army, and we have also now Europe really stepping up for defense spending. That will make it easier for you to focus also on China and not only, or be less concerned about the situation in Europe.
Meanwhile, fresh attacks are being carried out by both the warring parties. Russian military has claimed to carry out early morning cluster strikes on Ukrainian military facilities and shot down 75 Ukrainian military drones on Thursday, while Ukraine has escalated their counter-offense operations in southeastern Ukrainian city of Melitopol and eastern city of Bakhmut.
Meanwhile, Poland has decided to halt the supply of arms to Ukraine as they want to focus on revamping their own weapons stocks. Earlier, Polish Prime Minister said that they will no longer transfer weapons to Ukraine, which made Ukrainians restless. But later, Polish President Andrzej Duda said that the Prime Minister's comment was misinterpreted.
Prime Minister's words were interpreted in the worst possible way. Prime Minister was talking about the arms supplies in the context of the new arms supplies we buy from army, right? That was his statement. In my opinion, Prime Minister said this: we will not give away our new arms supplies that we are now buying as part of the Polish army modernization to Ukraine.
Niepotrzebne. To...
And our correspondent Megumi Lim joins us from Kiev in Ukraine. Megumi, what does this latest round of US aid include, and what does it mean for Ukraine and their ongoing counteroffensive? Megumi, are you able to hear me? Seems like we have a problem connecting with Megumi at the moment. We are discussing the United States aid given to Ukraine so that they can continue their offensive against Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine has also started testing its ability to restart commerce in its shipping lane after the Black Sea grain deal was suspended. Ukraine's deputy prime minister said that the second cargo vessel with grain departed from Ukraine's southwestern seaport, Chornomorsk. The official said that the vessel Aryuyat left with Ukrainian wheat for Egypt. As the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, India has urged both the warring parties to return to the path of diplomacy during an open debate at the United Nations Security Council.
India continues to remain concerned over the situation in Ukraine. We have always advocated that no solution can ever be arrived at the cost of human lives. Escalation of hostilities and violence is in no one's interest. We have urged that all efforts be made for an immediate cessation of hostilities and an urgent return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy.
And we are going back to Megumi Lim, who is reporting from Kiev in Ukraine. Megumi, we are talking about this US aid given to Ukraine. What does this latest round of aid include, and what does it mean for Ukraine's ongoing counteroffensive?
Okay.
We are going to connect with Megumi again. Let's move on for now. Now, news from the 78th UN General Assembly. The platform is critical in solving major global issues, and one of them is the Sudan conflict. Now, the heads of Sudan's rival military factions gave competing addresses to the United Nations on Thursday. My colleague, Ollie Barrett, is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, over to you.
That's right. Thank you very much indeed, Tanvi. The leaders of the warring factions of Sudan gave those competing addresses at the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, while the chief of the Sudanese army spoke from the podium of the United Nations headquarters. The leader of Sudan's paramilitary spoke through a video message from an undisclosed location.
After over 5 months of bloody conflict in Sudan, the heads of Sudan's rival military factions gave competing addresses to the United Nations on Thursday. The leader of Sudanese army, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, addressing the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, called on the international community to designate the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces as a terrorist organization.
I would like to reiterate our demand to designate the Rapid Support Forces and their allied militia as terrorist groups, for they have committed Our demand to designate the Rapid Support Forces and their allied militias as terrorist groups, for they have committed all sorts of crimes that gives ground for such designation. There is a need to firmly address their sponsors, those who have supported the killing, burning, raping, the forced displacement, the looting, stealing, torture, transfer of arms and drugs, bringing mercenaries or recruiting children. All such crimes that necessitates accountability and punishment.
Whereas the leader of Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, spoke in a video message from an undisclosed location. He claimed his forces were fully prepared for a ceasefire and political talks to end the conflict.
بوقف إطلاق النار بكافة أرجاء السودان لاستمرار مرور المساعدات الإنسانية وتوفير ممرات آمنة للمدنيين ولعمال الإغاثة تؤدي محادثات سياسية جادة شاملة تؤدي إلى حل سياسي شامل بإقامة حكومة مدنية تقود البلاد نحو التحول الديمقراطي واستلام الحقيقي الدائم. في الختام أتوجه إليكم جميعا بأسمى آيات الشكر
Conflict that erupted in mid-April from the capital Khartoum has been spreading to other parts, displacing over 5 million people. Further, the Sudanese army chief has now warned that the ongoing conflict is showing signs of spilling to other parts of the region as well. In New Delhi, Akshay Dongre, DD India.
And DD India's Patrick Oyet has more on this story now from Juba in neighbouring South Sudan.
When you look at the countries that are surrounding Sudan, then you see what the Sudanese military leader is talking about. For example, when you see, for example, South Sudan, where I am, you find that this is a country that has been also marred in conflict. There are up to now still armed groups that are not part of the government and they are fighting the government. So those armed groups can easily ally with other armed groups in other countries like Sudan and cause problems. A ceasefire and a negotiated settlement is possible. That is from the Rapid Support Forces, the paramilitary, whereas the government troops, the Sudan armed forces, think that perhaps militarily it could defeat the Rapid Support Forces. That's why it is calling for designating them as groups that are really not really a conventional war group or a group that is can be really just bandits, groups that are causing chaos, they're killing people. But the truth is that this group is pretty much well organized. It has a structure, it has the commanders, it has supporters, and it has some territories that it has also taken over and is controlling. So everybody in the region, in the IGAD region, in the East African region, thinks that the only way forward is a negotiated settlement. The challenge, however, with the negotiated settlement is that there are so many efforts, and these efforts are not coordinated. There is one effort known as the Neighbors of Sudan, which is being led by Egypt and Chad. There is another effort being led by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, a regional body where Sudan is a member. And then there's another one that has been led by the US and Saudi Arabia in Jeddah. So you see these parallel processes are going, and they don't speak with one voice, and that is why the parties in Sudan are finding it easy to get away with whatever they are doing. The only possible and viable solution that many people say here is actually to have a negotiated settlement, have a ceasefire, go for peace talk, and then share power. This is what many people think will resolve the Sudanese problem.
The ethnic Armenian leadership of breakaway Nagorno-Karabakh says there were no concrete results from talks with Azerbaijan on possible security guarantees or an amnesty that Baku is proposing. Azerbaijan mounted an offensive this week and declared it had restored sovereignty over Karabakh, whose ethnic Armenian population broke away in a war in the 1990s. According to an Azerbaijani presidential advisor, it hopes for an amnesty for Karabakh Armenian fighters who gave up their arms, although some have decided to continue their resistance. However, an agreement was reached between Baku and Stepanakert for a humanitarian convoy from Armenia, following which the first batch of food and medicines were delivered on Friday. 120,000 people in Nagorno-Karabakh have suffered severe shortages of supplies since late last year, when a blockade began of the road connecting the region to Armenia. Now, as representatives from Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan held their first round of talks, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said he wanted ethnic Armenians to remain in the region. At a government meeting, Pashinyan said he hoped the people of Yerevan would accept them, but a resettlement drive would only happen if it becomes impossible for Karabakh Armenians to stay there. Pashinyan insisted the current ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh is largely holding.
Units of the Nagorno-Karabakh Defense Army remain in the places where they were at the time the truce was signed. The same applies to the Azerbaijani armed forces. According to our data, unfortunately, today an incident occurred in the vicinity of Stepanakert. But in general, the truce remains, although sometimes there are violations.
Meanwhile, thousands of upset Armenians have been on the streets for a second day, calling for the government to step down. The protesters have been blocking roads and waving flags in demonstrations against the surrender of the Nagorno-Karabakh region. They're demanding the Armenian Prime Minister's resignation. Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bavramov says Azerbaijan's engagement in the region is fully in line with its rights under the UN Charter.
What Armenia tries to present to the international community as an attack on peaceful residents of the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan is in fact local counter-terror measures by Azerbaijan fully in line with its right under the UN Charter to disarm the Armenian armed formations illegally stationed in the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan. Armenia itself, with its brazen and uncorrected disregard to its international obligations, made these measures by Azerbaijan unavoidable.
US Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas, says the United States is concerned about the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. She insists Azerbaijan must make sure its forces go along with international law.
The United States is alarmed by the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh due to Azerbaijan's continued military actions, and we call for these actions to cease immediately. Azerbaijan has a responsibility to ensure its forces rigorously comply with international law, including international humanitarian law rules governing the conduct of hostilities, the protection of civilians, and the humane treatment of combatants. Azerbaijan also has international obligations and commitments to respect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all individuals in its territory. And thank you.
Here in the UK, police have charged 5 people suspected of spying for Russia with conspiracy to conduct espionage. All 5 will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Tuesday. The Bulgarian nationals are accused of conspiring to gather information which would be useful to an enemy between August 2020 and February 2023. It follows an investigation by the Metropolitan Police. DD India's Stuart Smith has more from London.
The UK media have been digging into public information published online by these suspects or people related to them. There are 3 men and 2 women, and initially the reports of this particular ring, who are suspected to be working together, came about when police announced they had found 3 individuals with fake identity documents from a host of countries, the UK and Bulgaria, but also France, Italy, Spain, Croatia, Slovenia, Greece and the Czech Republic. But in terms of their day-to-day lives, the most experienced, the eldest member of this alleged spy ring, Orlin Rusev, he has a history of business dealings with Russia. He's lived in the UK for a number of years at many different addresses and also operated different businesses. He's worked, according to his LinkedIn profile, in roles related to business in signals intelligence, and also has had a role in the financial services, as well as previously back in Bulgaria working with its Ministry of Energy. 2 other names mentioned, less information about them. Bizar Jamba Shahbazov and Katrine Ivanova. They, one of them working as a driver for hospitals, the other, the woman, working as a laboratory assistant. And the youngest of these five, Vanya Gabarova, is a 29-year-old British-based director. She has been running a beautician business specializing in eyelash extensions, according to public information published by her and also by other companies that she's worked with. They're going to the Westminster Magistrates Court, which is the lowest level of the court system in England and Wales. There they're expected to put forth their plea. We don't know yet whether they're pleading not guilty or guilty, but we know already there is a trial scheduled in January next year at the Old Bailey due to the serious nature of these alleged crimes. Remember, they're charged with espionage, effectively, which could mean a prison sentence, and therefore this will go to a higher court than just the magistrates' court. One of the questions still to be looked into is whether this will be an open trial due to the fact that there will be discussions, most likely, of sensitive intelligence.
That's it from me here in London. Tanvi, have a great weekend, and back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ollie. Have a great weekend, you too. Ollie Barrett joining me from our London bureau. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on the show. Climate change also in focus at the UNGA as Prime Minister of Tuvalu says the scenic island nation in the Pacific is disappearing bit by bit. A musician who survived the quake in Morocco pays a musical tribute to his old group members who died in the quake.
In a world that never stops, where information shapes our reality, one app stands out, helps you stay ahead of time. Introducing the DD India app, your gateway to a world of news right at your fingertips. Your most trusted source of news goes global, goes digital. Explore a world of options, top stories, live updates, in-depth analysis, and more. Stay informed wherever you are. Real-time alerts keep you ahead of the curve always. The DD India app, connecting you to the world, one story at a time. Download now and explore the world of knowledge, insights, and authentic information.
The Indian government has brought in 33% reservation for women in parliament. How significant do you think this move is?
It's a really significant move. The kinds of decisions that parliaments make begin to change and begin to become more responsive to the needs of women and girls.
Why are we depending on this template still?
There isn't equality yet. So I don't know whether you have this analogy in India, but we say it's not an equal playing field.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. The G4 nations, India, Brazil, Japan and Germany, have reiterated that the expansion of the UN Security Council in both permanent and non-permanent categories is essential to make the body more representative, legitimate, effective and efficient. They underscored that multilateralism is under significant strain due to multiple and complex crises. Moreover, they concurred that the UN Security Council's inability to effectively and timely address contemporary global challenges reinforces the urgent need for its comprehensive reform so that it better reflects contemporary geopolitical realities. Further, in the open debate, India also hailed its G20 presidency and said that economic difficulties faced by developing countries were brought to the forefront.
We note with regret that the collateral consequences of the conflict have led to rising prices of food, fuel and fertilizers, affecting the world at large and particularly the member states of the Global South who have been left to fend for themselves. India's G20 presidency has ensured that some of these economic pitfalls faced by developing countries were brought to the forefront of the G20 agenda for solutions like debt distress.
Now, another agenda on focus at the UNGA is that of climate change. climate crisis is fueling environmental degradation across the world. Leaders gathered at the Climate Ambition Summit at the United Nations General Assembly to discuss how to tackle climate change.
With climate crisis deepening across the world, leaders who gathered at the Climate Ambition Summit at United Nations General Assembly have called to set aside rivalries and reinvigorate efforts to combat the challenge. They echoed that there were no miracle for global wars.
We are preparing to create a new defense ecosystem together with the United States to produce weapons to further reinforce freedom and the production of life together. This will yield global positive results.
I accept, of course, that the climate crisis is not an alibi for everything, but the science is clear. Unprecedented temperatures fueled by global warming are creating the conditions that drive these catastrophic events.
The survival of the planet must be our priority. We cannot afford to go into this war with a divided high command. The future of all species on the globe is dependent on our ability to put aside our rivalries until this crisis is solved.
Meanwhile, defining the severe effects of climate change, Tuvalu's Prime Minister said the country could be one of the first nations to sink beneath the sea as a result of climate change. However, the tiny Pacific archipelago's leader stressed that this does not mean that its statehood is up for discussion.
The time is right for the multilateral system to phase down fossil fuels, the root cause of so many fundamental challenges. And this is the natural next step. Tuvalu is proud that we are working alongside our Pacific neighbors, the European Parliament, and the World Health Organization to develop a comprehensive multilateral framework that addresses the climate crisis at its root cause.
Remember how Tuvalu's foreign minister filmed the speech to climate summit COP26 standing knee-deep in the ocean to show how the nation is vulnerable to global warming.
India's Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has cancelled his trip to China. This comes after 3 Indian athletes were denied entry to China for the 19th Asian Games underway in Guangzhou. The Ministry of External Affairs in a statement said, India firmly rejects differential treatment of Indian citizens on the basis of domicile or ethnicity. It added that Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will always remain an integral and inalienable part of India. A strong protest has also been lodged in New Delhi and Beijing against China's deliberate and selective obstruction of some of our sportspersons, this statement said. In response to media queries on some Indian sportspersons being denied entry into the 19th Asian Games, Arindam Bagchi said that Government of India has learnt that the Chinese authorities have, in a targeted and premeditated manner, discriminated against some of the Indian sportspersons from the state of Arunachal Pradesh by denying them accreditation and entry to the 19th Asian Games. And now let's take a look at other news stories around the world. Colombia's third biggest city, Cali, is battling with raging wildfires for more than 10 hours on Thursday. A video footage showed the fires flaring up on the hills of Atlas de Menga in north of the capital of the Valle de Coa province. Meanwhile, the Cali Fire Brigade on Friday confirmed that the fire was under control. They added that the risk of damage to homes had also been ruled out. One of the world's smallest active volcanoes, Thakur, spewed above average sulfur dioxide and volcanic smog on Friday. The volcano prompted the authorities to close schools in several cities and dozens of towns. Post-deadly quake in Morocco, a young musician has taken responsibility of spreading melodious smiles wherever he goes. Mohsin Dalima's group members, who are no longer alive, used to play Amazigh music for the people of Moulay Ibrahim town in Al Haus province, an area affected by the tragic quake. With those tunes, we wind up this edition of DD India Global. We'll be back with another edition of DD India Global at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online on YouTube at DD India. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching. Namaskar.